I'm very happy to be here and to present this work. So just as a little bit of self-advertising here, so there's actually a whole stream of literature, like it's not massive, but there's a body of papers, I guess. You know, if you're interested in lessons learned and studies about InnerSource. I started studying this for my PhD back in 2008, I guess. And so one of the first papers is about, comparing the differences, or like comparing InnerSource with open source, so companies integrating open source components. Well, you find the same problems when doing InnerSource. That then led to, I guess, an identification of what are the key factors, like what are the things that you need to have in place when you want to do InnerSource. So that's key factors paper. The colorful one is just a glossy, much shorter version of that. And today I'm going to present this paper. And the full title is, Does Adopting InnerSource Increase Job Satisfaction? So this is work together with Mario, who was here today, but who had to go to a different open source event. And also Lorraine Morgan at the University of Galway, also in Ireland. And yeah, so we've done this work together. Actually, the origin of the study was me attending an event actually in Galway, and I was somebody presenting about InnerSource and basically asking the question, how can we convince our management? You know, like InnerSource costs money. You have to invest resources. You have to give people time and so on. And so then I had this idea. I figured, well, I think I can help you. And it took many years actually to eventually run and then publish the study. But the focus is, rather than focusing on repositories and the technicalities, why not focus on trying to convince managers? And so that's why the subtitle here is shifting the focus from repositories, rather than focusing on the technical details, focus on relationships, and it will become clear why that is. So participating in InnerSource does not create more job satisfaction, is my statement here directly. Part of the book, this is actually the depiction of the cheese story, the story of big cheeses that Denise, started telling, I guess, around 2014, 15. And this is kind of the explanation of how things go when you don't do InnerSource. So you have the big cheese heads, and the big cheese heads, they have to basically, fight over like who can contribute to what repository. So these are the pictures of the book that we published in 2018, Adopting InnerSource, Principles and Case Studies. And what you want is, you want to go to an InnerSource model. And so InnerSource is about breaking down silos. We've heard that several times before today. Silos are sometimes fiefdoms, each business unit is managed by a manager, a business unit manager, who has responsibility for the business unit and is not typically interested too much in the success of other business units. So you are responsible for your own little empire. And that's the problem. So there is a relationship between InnerSource participation and job satisfaction. If you talk to Georg has once declared that the InnerSource days was the best time of his life, along those lines. So there is certainly anecdotal evidence for an increase in job satisfaction, but there is no direct link. So what gives? Question to you: what do these things have in common? Neighborhood watch programs, sports clubs, religious congregations. Is any of you involved in any of these three items? Community, yeah. Actually, they provide structure, so people form bonds by interacting at the sports club or neighborhood watch programs or whatever. Cognition, people agree on shared rules. So a neighborhood watch program is about sharing shared rules. A congregation is about shared rules. Sports clubs, obviously, they have norms how you don't drink too much in the canteen, that kind of thing. And relationships, you build relationships through these communities. And these are the three dimensions of what is called social capital. Social capital is kind of the generic term, or like a general phenomenon, and it's declared, I'm not yeah, okay, I think there's just a misplaced enter there. Potential resources embedded with, available through, and derived from the network of relationships possessed by an individual or a social unit. So potential resources is a little bit of a vague term, but we're going to apply this to InnerSource. So social capital was my hypothesis, might explain the link between InnerSource participation and job satisfaction. And we were right. And I'm going to show you how we study this. So basically, this was kind of at a high level our idea that InnerSource participation is not directly linked to job satisfaction, but it goes through social capital. You have to, through the participation of InnerSource, you extend your network, you build social capital, and that can in turn lead to job satisfaction. Now, I just mentioned the 3 dimensions of social capital. Social, it's the structural dimension, so the network, the people that you know. The cognitive dimension, where you have a shared understanding or shared vision of stuff. And the relational dimension. So typically what happens is that because you know people and because you speak the same language or you have the same vision, those 2 things can build trust. So trust is one of the elements of the relational dimension. There's other elements, but we focused on trust in this particular study. So the full research model, just kind of like a simplification of the world that we try to study, I guess, is that you have InnerSource participation, that in turn generates social capital, and that in turn leads to job satisfaction. Now the question is, this is all very well, but how do you measure this? Because measurement is also a recurring theme. We know that InnerSource works, we know that it's a good thing, and we know that it happens, but how to measure it? I'll get to that on the next slide. So what we did to study this is a multi-method study, so quantitative analysis and a qualitative study. So we did a survey at one organization. We had 155 responses. And through that survey, we asked specific questions to, about that research model. And I'll explain to you in a minute how we did that. So 155 responses, and we linked the GitLab activity, so the actual participation, to people's opinions about stuff, like trust. And we use structural equation modeling, which is an advanced statistical technique to actually model this. The qualitative study comprised 22 interviews with 17 participants at 6 organizations. So how do you measure trust? So trust is called a latent variable. It's out there, but we don't quite know how to measure it. And so the way to do this is with structural equation modeling. There's advanced statistical techniques. So trust is kind of the common factor, and you can infer its existence by probing, by asking specific questions. So what you can do is you can ask a bunch of questions, like, for example, these are the specific questions that we asked this particular company, and they had an InnerSource, like they had a community that we labeled Syscom. So people, and basically, these are questions that people have to address or like answer on a 5-point scale. It's called a Likert scale, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. People in the Syscom InnerSource community will always keep the agreements they make with one another. And so people can say, well, that is mostly true, or that is not true at all. So you kind of get a sense for how people perceive this to be true in their particular context. And we had 155 responses. So so the 3 boxes were 3 questions, and we had questions for all the different latent variables, so trust, participation, and the other ones. So participation was measured in terms of the number of pull requests that were merged by that particular person, number of pull requests contributed, and number of projects shared. And we had all this information from the GitLab repositories, so we could link those 2 different things. And so we infer the existence of this latent variable called participation. And there's certain statistical techniques for that, how you can generate those numbers. So the quantitative results looked as follows. So these are standardized coefficients. The higher, the stronger the relationships, and these numbers are pretty okay. Like 0.60 is obviously a little bit more convincing than, let's say, 0.20. But nevertheless, these are statistically significant, meaning that it is unlikely. It's very unlikely that these numbers just happen, at random, right? So the model is supported by the quantitative data. But we also did some interviews. And in the paper that you can download for free, you can actually read all the quotes basically. But just to kind of illustrate one by one, the relationship between participation and social interaction. So the network that you build up was, this should resonate with all of you, I guess. So we were trying to break up the silos within the source. Anyone can join any project easily if they are interested in the idea. And this is the interesting bit. There's now a super strong network effect. Developers now know other developers in other business units. So this is because people participated in InnerSource. They now form, interaction ties. So this is the structural dimension of social capital. In terms of shared understanding, so actually building a shared language and a shared vision, getting everybody looking in the same direction, keeping the same goals in mind. A similar quote, there's less time and frustration spent on basically blaming others. The bold-faced text is the most interesting. Now everybody gets the opportunity to actually integrate what they learn from having new people look at their system. So by exchanging information, by having other people look at your code, they now start to understand, this is why your code is structured like this. This was also an issue. So, for example, I did a case study at Philips many years ago now, 15 years ago, I guess. And Philips, like many other organizations, is what is called a federated organization. And that term has also been used several times, I think, today. That the problem with federated organizations is that they used to be independent companies, and they were acquired, and now they are all called Philips, even though those people used to work in different companies. And these are now run as kind of independent business units, and now they have to interact. And they don't understand why the code is structured the way it is. Why would they use a particular architecture that other people are not familiar with, and therefore you have you lack that shared vision. By having people work together on a code, you create that shared vision. You have this shared understanding of how the source code is structured and why it is the way it is. So these interaction ties, so knowing people, having this network, that can help build trust. And as the quote suggests, there's no shortcuts to building trust. So building trust takes time. You need to know people, but you also need to interact with people. And so in this particular, interviewee said, well, we put people in places that have open personality. So suggesting that, well, it's not that anybody can just talk to anybody. What you want to do is put specific people in the right place. People who are happy to advocate for stuff. And some people are a little bit more shy, and other people, they are a little bit more enthusiastic. You want to have those champions in place to build those networks. And then, so the relationship between cognitive dimensions, so a shared vision, shared language, so that you understand each other, that also helps to build trust. It is important to have a clear unifying vision so that people don't waver off in different directions and send mixed messages to the rest of the team. So what you want to have is that people, they see, okay, we're building this particular component, but it slots into the whole in a particular way, so that people understand, this is what we're working towards. So that it's not just some random code that you see and think, well, I'm not sure why they're doing that. By building that shared vision and that shared language, you help people to understand why it is done in a particular way, and that in turn helps build trust. And then finally, this trust helps build job satisfaction. So people can do things for themselves. This led to, rather than a feature request, you can now send a pull request. I think Denise came up with that term or phrase. No feature request, but a pull request. Rather than making requests or demands or whatever of the other business unit, you just do it yourself, and then you send the pull request. So people can do things for themselves, and this led to much more efficient development, better code quality, and that in turn translates to job satisfaction, because people are less frustrated. So investing in InnerSource means investing in people and social capital, and that is the message I think that you can give to your management. And the study is published in the Journal of Strategic Information Systems. So this is kind of specifically geared towards a management audience. So it's, you know, the language is accordingly, I guess. And you can freely download it. Now, if you can't remember the DOI, which is the Digital Object Identifier, you can also go to my website, which is not very well maintained except for the publications page, because, yeah, you know, that makes me feel good about myself, you know. So, and that concludes my presentation. So you know, this is evidence for, you know, that InnerSource, investment in InnerSource actually translates to a higher job satisfaction. That is good for managers, because that means there's a very strong link between job satisfaction and retention. So, you know, if you don't have retention, that means that people leave. If people leave, you have to hire new people. You have to onboard them. It's going to take 9 months before they're productive. So actually, so that money is better spent on, you know, on giving people some slack time to contribute to InnerSource. So I thank you very much.